Hi, I'm Pat Keown, a research analyst with Thomson Reuters Lipper, and I'm here to speak to you about the fund flows activity for the week ended Wednesday, January 18th. Let's start by taking a quick look at the last week's market activity. Both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 Index were off for the week. The Dow was down 0.8%, while the S&P was off just 0.2%, as some investors started to worry that the Trump rally may be losing some steam. Another negative for the markets last week was an interview that Trump gave to the Wall Street Journal, in which he stated that the U.S. was at a competitive economic disadvantage with China due to our stronger currency. Let's turn our attention back now to the fund flows activity. We'll start by taking a look at our fund macro groups. Equity mutual funds had net outflows of $729 million last week. Taxable bond funds took in $2 billion. Muni bond funds also had net inflows of $545 million, and money market funds saw approximately $18 billion leave their coffers. Let's take a closer look at our equity fund groups now. We'll start by taking a look at the mutual fund side of things. The $729 million in net outflows was once again driven by the domestic equity side of things. Domestic equity mutual funds had net outflows of $1.2 billion for the week. This was within the domestic equity group. This was led by large cap growth funds and large cap core funds, which had net outflows of $592 million and $408 million respectively. On the non-domestic equity side, once again, we saw they took in some new money, approximately $430 million there. And the biggest player in that group was the international multi-cap core funds, which had net inflows of $340 million. Let's turn our attention now to equity ETFs. This group saw net outflows last week, roughly $2.3 billion, which broke a streak of 3 straight weekly inflows. The largest outflows belong to the SPDR S&P 500, which saw $2.3 billion leave, and the Financial Select Sector SPDR, which had about $690 million leave. On the plus side of things, the iShares Core MSCI Emerging Markets product took in net new money of roughly $560 million. Moving on now, we'll turn our attention to the taxable bond fund groups, starting with the mutual funds. We see they had net inflows of $2 billion last week, their 3rd straight week of net inflows. Once again, leading the charge was loan participation funds. They took in almost $500 million for the week. They've had a post-election rally during which they've taken in $7.1 billion in net new money. This has been driven by the rising interest rate environment. Bank loan funds benefit from this because most of them are floating rates. And also Trump's campaign promises of less financial regulation should make the process of lending money easier and more frequent. Okay, that wraps up mutual funds. Let's take a look at taxable bond ETFs now. This group had net outflows last week, $540 million. Once again, this breaks a streak of 3 straight net inflows for the group. The largest outflows belong to 2 high-yield products. The iShares iBoxx High Yield Corporate ETF had outflows of roughly $870 million, and the SPDR Bloomberg Barclays High Yield product saw about $350 million leave. On the plus side, the iShares short-term treasury product had net inflows of approximately $165 million. Moving on to our next group now, muni bond funds. Muni bond funds experienced their 2nd straight week of net inflows, taking in approximately $545 million on the heels of $790 million the week before. Once again, this week's activity was driven by high-yield muni debt funds, which had net inflows of $421 million, following the net inflows of $770 million from last week. Our last group to take a look at is money market funds. Money market funds had high net outflows again last week. They saw roughly $18 billion leave their coffers. This was driven by institutional U.S. government money market funds and institutional U.S. Treasury market funds, which had net outflows of $10 billion and $6.2 billion, respectively. Well, that wraps up this week's report. If you'd like to take a closer look at the data, please join us at our website, www.lipperusfundflows.com. And please join us here again next week, where another one of our analysts will be speaking about that week's fund flows activity.